Hi, everyone, and welcome to Michigan on a Mission, Money Out of Politics, brought to you by the Hip Hop Caucus. I'm Dr. Alexa White, the Policy Director of the Hip Hop Caucus, and I'm glad to be having you in this conversation. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a fight that is deeply local and very clearly national at the same time. In Michigan, Michiganders for Money Out of Politics, or MMOP, is advancing a ballot initiative to get big money out of Michigan politics by banning political contributions from regulated utilities and certain government contractors, closing the issue ad loophole and modernizing the campaign finance disclosure requirements. And so why does all that matter? Really because when wealthy interests and powerful corporations are allowed to shape the rules, everyday people lose trust in the government and then too often lose power over those decisions that shape their very lives. So this conversation is not just about what's broken, but it's also about what is possible. So across the country, states are really testing how we can challenge that concentrated wealth and what the entrenched political influence and recent wins are showing for those structural fights and how we can really break through. So that's why I'm excited to be joined today by three incredible panelists who are really working to help tell that larger story and connect all the dots. So over the next hour, we're going to talk about why each of the campaigns matter, what Michigan can teach the country, and then how people can get involved in building those a more accountable democracy. So we'll be joined by Sean McBrearty, who is the Michigan State Director at Clean Water Action. He began with the organization in 2011 and became the Michigan State Director in 2023. He is also the Vice Chair of the Michiganders for Money Out of Politics Steering Committee. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Dr. White. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Next, we have Emma Sclazzo. She is the Executive Director of Balance Our Tax Code, a Washington coalition of more than 80 labor unions, nonprofits, and immigrant rights advocates, housing advocates, and other organizations working for a more just and equitable tax code. Emma joined the coalition as a member in 2019 before later leading it. Welcome, Emma.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. And last but not least, Tamika Ramsey is Michigan State Director of One Fair Wage. She has been a visible leader in the campaign to restore one fair wage for tipped workers in Michigan and has helped drive signature collection in that fight. Welcome, Tamika.
Good evening.
Thank you all for joining us. So if we're all ready, let's begin. This first piece is really about Sean and Tamika. If someone is passing you in the street and you have about 2 minutes to tell them what the ballot narrative and referral is to the court, what is it about? What are each of these ballot initiatives and referendum about? First, let's start with Sean.
Yeah, so the Money Out of Politics ballot initiative is about the fact that we have one of the worst political corruption problems in the country right here in Michigan. We constantly rank near the bottom in government ethics and transparency. We have one former Speaker of the House serving a prison sentence for financial corruption. We have another former Speaker currently on trial for financial corruption issues. Meanwhile, the two biggest utilities in Michigan, year after year, get rate hikes granted by people who they're funding. The three biggest spenders we have in Michigan politics are DTE, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Consumers Energy. All of them consistently hike rates on our people, and then they use their profits to buy the lawmakers who are supposed to represent all of us. So Michiganders for Money Out of Politics is people across our state coming together to say that we're done with business as usual in Lansing. We're done with big corporations buying the influence that rightly belongs to the people. So we're coming together to ban them from continuing to buy our political system.
Amazing work.
And for one fair wage, I think it's really important to talk about fairness and equity. So we know that after the end of slavery and Reconstruction, most freed slaves became servers. And when you serve, it is at the kindness of the person who you're serving, whether or not you're going to get paid. The fact that the minimum wage for a tipped worker in the state of Michigan is less than $5. And the minimum wage for hourly workers has increased is problematic. We all deserve to be able to work and take care of our families. And when you have servers who are on their feet, I have a daughter who is a server and I have a son who used to be, and this fight is different for them, right? My daughter has been sexually harassed. She has been made to feel less than and made to feel like she has to tolerate these things in order to get a tip. And so I think having one fair wage, which means no matter if you are hourly or a tip worker, you get a minimum wage that is fair, is really important. And that's what One Fair Wage is working on for everyone. So an equal minimum wage for all workers. Thank you.
Thank you both for helping to reshape our democracy in Michigan. And so for those who are newer to this issue, these Michigan fights and Washington's recent millionaire tax, I really would like you all to tell us about why specifically these state level battles matter nationally. And so Emma, do you want to begin?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about the millionaire's tax and the win with that. I've been kind of right in the wave of celebration this last week, getting together with folks and really thanking our lawmakers and our partners. So I feel like it's finally happening, which feels great. So for those of you that don't know, Washington State doesn't have an income tax, so a state income tax. So that means that our state budget largely relies on really regressive taxes like sales and property taxes, which disproportionately impact the lowest income earners in our state, while we have some of the richest corporations and richest people living in our state. So despite having a lot of wealth and a lot of great, like a really wealthy tech sector, a really booming economy, our state year after year is unable to sustain the budget on sales and property taxes alone. And so we keep in the past, we kept dialing up the scales for the most regressive taxes, which disproportionately impact the lowest income earners. So our tax code has always looked like upside down, where lowest income earners are paying the most, while the top 1% pay the least. So the millionaire's tax was proposed as an evening out of the tax code. It's our first ever income tax, but it's only on incomes above $1 million. So if you're making $1 million a year, let's say you're making $1,001 a year, you'd have a 9-cent tax on that dollar. So it's a very modest tax on a lot of money, and it's expected to generate about $3 billion a year for the things that we all need in Washington, like good schools and roads, and provides free school meals at K through 12. So it's a huge win. It took a long time, but it's great to see, in the face of HR 1 cuts, and I know a lot of devastating impacts across not only Washington, but across the nation, what we can do locally to make sure we're protecting the things we care about in our communities and in our states.
Amazing work. Congratulations. Sean, you want to have a go?
Absolutely. So money in politics, especially since the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, has really had a detrimental impact, not only here in Michigan, but across the country. And there is, this broader national push that we're seeing in state after state to curb the influence of wealthy individuals and special interest groups in our elections. And at the same time, we know that with the Trump regime in power, the United States is sliding into becoming an authoritarian state. And the best research on democracies experiencing authoritarian backsliding shows that the only way, at least the clearest way to get out of an authoritarian backslide and get back to a place where the people have influence and say in our government, is by enacting these big, powerful reforms. Things like the Washington graduated income tax, one fair wage, getting money out of politics. It's exactly the big things that the democracy itself was not able to do when it fell, which I think we have a great example of that here in Michigan, where from 2022 to 2024, we had what was the first Democratic trifecta in our state where we had a governor and a House and Senate that were all controlled by the Democrats. And what big, bold things did they accomplish? Almost nothing. Instead, they spent that time giving away $4.5 billion to the biggest corporations in the state. And so we saw they were incapable of doing the major reforms that were needed to preserve democracy in the end. And we've been experiencing as a nation this authoritarian backsliding in the Trump era, where enacting these big, bold reforms that give people confidence in government again is the only way back to creating a healthy government. So, I think that these are 3 examples. There are plenty more examples going on across the country of important campaigns that are going to help kind of save and bring back our democracy, which I think is essential, the essential thing that we need to concentrate on in the next few years.
Exactly. And then Tamika.
So listen, I love the History Channel. I love it. Because we already know what happened, right? There are no surprises. But one of the shows that I love to watch is the Food That Built America. It is just a story of how corporations, right, from the inception of this country, started to use capitalism as a way. And so it reminds me that at one point in history, people fought to stop monopolies. They fought for the 40-hour work week. Like, we have been fighting for these rights for a long time because this country, like capitalism, and these are the things that we're fighting, using money for power has been built into our country. And it takes organization like ours to work together, because every time we stop, with the monopolies, with the antitrust, they figure out a way to do it again. And so here we are 100 years later, literally having some of the same fights that people had to deal with in the early 1900s, because capitalism is winning. These corporations are taking over, and once they got a birth certificate, right, and they have just as much rights as I do as a human being, as a corporation, but they have a lot more money, a lot more resources. In Michigan, we have been fighting for one fair wage since 2015. When I joined the movement, that was my first job, was to get signatures for the fight for 15. And that was, once again, in 2015. In 2026, $15 still isn't enough, but that's what Michigan is going to. But not even all Michiganders who work 40-hour work weeks will even benefit from that, because if you are a tipped worker, you still get less than everyone else. And so it's important. It's really, really important that we have these conversations, that we hold these corporations accountable, because they're only going to do what's right if we make them. They're never going to willingly pay their fair share or support the communities in ways that everyday working Americans do.
Thank you, Tamika. That historical context is really important for us to understand how to move forward, and really what's been going on forever is just exacerbated right now. And so that brings me into the next question, which is, how does this really trickle down to the daily lives of Michiganders? And how has this trickled down to the daily lives of Washingtonians? So Tamika, you want to go first?
I will kick us off. And I feel like we are being honest. It's just very depressing, right? That we have to not only talk about this, but people are currently living this life. Especially in 2026, April, in Trump's America, you have people who have to work multiple jobs, right? Because one job isn't enough. So if you're working, you're not able to be a part of the political process because you just don't have time. We ask people all the time, can you show up? And if they're showing up for their 2 jobs and then going home to take care of their kids, then that says something different. economic fairness is so important because it allows us to have not even a fair playing field, because I don't even know if America knows what that is, but to at least help get working class Americans to the next point. And I think that's really important. The money in politics determine that the people with the most money will have policy made that benefit them. And we know that when policies benefit corporations, they do not benefit working everyday Americans. And those are the things that we're fighting against. It's important that our elected officials also know it's important, because right now we are in the fight of our lives and we don't have time for people to be wishy-washy or hesitant or trying to be neutral. While we're doing these things, people are losing their homes and their cars and their lives. It is important that we stop this now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamika. Sean?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think that this is core to why we're doing this. In February of this year, DTE Energy, the biggest energy utility in the state, it was a $220 million rate increase approved by the Michigan Public Service Commission. And what they do, 7 days later, they turned around and filed for another $500 million rate increase. In March, Consumers Energy, the second largest utility in the state, got approved for a $250 million rate increase. And what they do, 7 days later, they turned around and applied for another $500 million rate increase. Consumers and DTE have both made record profits over the last few years. The CEO of Consumers Energy makes over $10 million a year. Same with DTE. Blue Cross Blue Shield, the biggest health insurer of the state, has already raised rates on Michiganders this year, and they're likely to do it again. And these are the three biggest spenders in the last 10 years in Michigan politics. When we wonder why here in Michigan, when people go see their doctor and their doctors, say that a procedure or a medicine is medically necessary, more often here than elsewhere, that procedure won't get covered by insurance. And that's because there are different rules for what our doctors say is medically necessary versus what the insurance companies say is medically necessary. There's literally two different rule books. There was a bill in Michigan, in Michigan's legislature in 2023 to try to make it so that insurance companies had to meet the same standards of care that our healthcare practitioners have to meet. And that bill was killed by, you guessed it, Blue Cross Blue Shield. When we wanted to do community solar, which would bring cheap renewable energy into communities that need it the most, third-party owned community solar, something that a lot of states have and take for granted, I think, in some contexts. Here in Michigan, by the way, we pay the highest rates per kilowatt hour for energy in the Midwest. And we rank, again, near the bottom of the country in power supply. We have the most power outages and the longest duration of power outages. And so with all that being said, they were able to block community solar, which would bring power exactly to the residents who need it the most because of the influence of DTE and Consumers Energy in Lansing. So this would have an extreme impact on the lives of regular people across the state because they would have the political power back that has been supposed to be theirs from the beginning, but has been bought and sold to the highest bidder by big corporations and by our utilities and government contractors, which are the very companies that we're aiming at with this ballot initiative.
Sean, Tamika, thank you for creating the blueprint for Michigan. Emma, understanding the win in Washington, we'd love to know how this has trickled down to people in Washington. What can we expect considering all these different state fights that are emerging?
Yeah, well, Washington State, you probably think of, I don't know, like granola, maybe some Sasquatch hanging out in the forest. Like you think of a really, honestly, truly progressive state, and yet we have a lot of poverty here in our state. We have a really substantial housing shortage, which is resulting in a huge homelessness crisis and mental health crisis. And what we believe here at Balance Our Tax Code is that poverty is a policy choice and budgets are moral documents. So when the state continues to halt affordable housing, and our resources are tapped out for human services and mental health supports. Social workers are overworked and underpaid. This is what our communities looks like because of direct decisions by our state government to underfund the things that people are heavily relying on to get by. So in that way, the millionaire's tax is a new mechanism for us to really ask the folks that are benefiting from our beautiful forests, our beautiful park services, our really great and rapidly expanding transit system. Those are all services that our mega corporations in our state really rely on and really use as a selling point for a lot of skilled workers. But they are not contributing the same amount as the folks that are barely scraping by and being displaced by these giant tech corporations. And I'm saying tech a lot, but there's a lot of corporations just in our state. And so really, I think this is just a new tool that we have. And it's, we passed it in like the last month or so, and then we still have a ballot fight ahead of us. So we're going to defend it at the ballot box in November. And I think that this will be a really clear mandate for our lawmakers of what we stand for here in Washington, that this is a truly popular tax and that we want to see more of this in the future. So it's all still in process, but it's a big win, and it's a big opportunity for us to make deep investments on the things that we need the most here in Washington State. Because, that's what's going to show, like, people don't experience taxes other than when you have to pay them. And it is a big, it's a personal experience of like, it's a heavy weight to have to go and file your taxes and, sometimes pay or even sometimes get some money back, but it's a very personal experience. And the things that we don't interact with that our taxes actually pay for, I think that that's really what we need to be highlighting and really working on as like a tax justice movement across states of like, I'm proud to be a taxpayer, and this is why, because I love riding the bus and I love my like local library. I have a kid in an early learning center near my work, things like that really highlight what taxes do for folks, because the only time you interact with taxes is when you have to pay them or file them, and it's just we're kind of removed from our tax system in that way, and it is by design. It's because wealthy corporations have CPAs and accountants and policy folks that lobby for large tax breaks, and that's really one of their main agendas in having like a presence in any state capital. But that's really what the big push and pull is in our state of like these big tech corporations threatening to move. And so the more we can kind of push lawmakers and really show up at the ballot this year, it's going to be like a very clear mandate that this is the direction that we need to head as a state. So time will tell, but for now it's a really big win and that we're really excited about. And I'm actually really excited for like the campaign process, because that's going to be a really good time to like build up our messaging, do a lot of education, and really like, have folks engage with our tax system in a different way. So more to come.
Very optimistic. Thanks for your work. One thing that I'm hearing throughout all of your stories and all of your work is that there have been initiatives that happened in the past. And I think what would be really useful for our audience today is to understand what makes this different, what makes this moment different, what makes these initiatives different, and how can we act on that? Sean, I'll go first.
Yes, thank you. So, we attempted this. Our coalition has been working on this for a few years. And during the Democratic trifecta in Michigan, we tried to get this passed through the legislature. And when we had what's essentially our ballot initiative as a 4-bill package introduced in Lansing, we were actually able to make it a bipartisan package. We had I think maybe 3 or 4 Democrats and 1 Republican signed on. And we couldn't even get a room in the Capitol to introduce it in a press conference. The Democratic speaker at the time, who controls all the rooms, and the speaker controls all the rooms in the legislative buildings, wouldn't even give us a room. We had to do our introductory press conference at the church across the street. And then our bill package was promptly sent to the Government Operations Committee, which is where we call, where bills go to die. During the Democratic trifecta, it was unfortunately a graveyard of beautiful progressive legislation. It became very clear that this legislature, and really no legislature in Michigan, was ever going to put rules in place that regulate themselves and that make it so that they're not able to take these huge corporate checks, which some people have been living off of. In fact, I do want to share a story. We actually had a former Senate majority leader in Michigan who is currently living off of the interest from his 501c4 dark money account that he had set up when he was a senator. So literally is just living off the interest of that account. This is how corrupt the system is in both parties in Michigan. So right after you get elected, and let's say you're a new state house representative or a new state senator, they have you come down to Lansing right after the election, usually like the day after, and you do two things. You elect your leadership for the next session, and you start kind of a boot camp process where they teach you how to become a state representative, like state legislator. So they elect a new speaker at that point, which means that the lobbyists, like the big corporate lobbyists, are really the ones who have the influence over who gets to be the speaker. Freshman lawmakers are just kind of herded down and told what to do. And it takes a lot of guts to stand up to people in your caucus who are going to be with you in the legislature doing that. One of the first things they teach, that both parties teach people once you become an elected, is how to open your own dark money account where you can take all the contributions that you told your constituents you're not going to take. When they're determining who gets leadership roles, the determining factor in most caucuses, and this is a choice, it doesn't have to be that way. The determining factor in most caucuses and who gets leadership roles is how much money they are donating to the caucus. And then the caucus puts that money into whatever races they want. So money in politics, is and has been this huge problem that we have. And it became very clear that the legislature was not going to regulate itself the way that it ought to. And so the next step for us was to take this to the ballot. We had, polling showing that 81% of Michigan residents were in favor of this ballot initiative. And actually, so we did message testing with that. And for those who may have not seen how message testing works before, usually on like a ballot initiative, if you run negative messages at your ballot initiative, you can watch it lose about 10 points when negative messaging hits. And if you're still in the mid 50s or so, you're probably good. I've never seen this happen before, where we started at 81%, and when they ran negative messages against it, we jumped to 86% in favor. So the negative, like the opposition messaging actually helps people see that what we're doing is the right thing to do. I think, and by the time DTE and Blue Cross Blue Shield and all the rest of them, tar every newspaper and media outlet across the state with ads attacking us in this campaign, I think the only people who aren't going to vote for this are a lot of the lawmakers and lobbyists right to the west of me here in downtown Lansing. This is such a broadly popular initiative that it's one of the things that gives me faith that we can bring back our democracy a little bit. Another anecdote from the campaign, a few weeks ago during the No Kings protests, we had people circulating petitions at all the No Kings protests across Michigan. There were 130 of them, I think. And we also had people circulating petitions at the state Republican convention. And we got the same wildly popular reactions at the No Kings events and at the Republican convention from grassroots people. And so, this is one of those things that is restoring my faith in democracy. The other thing that I think we're able to provide here is, with the way we're doing this, we're creating a blueprint that I think other states will be able to follow to at least limit the influence of big corporate money on our political process.
That polling piece was really stunning. I think you showed us all this is just common sense. Emma, what makes this moment different?
Well, I think in Washington State, HR 1 really set the tone for our legislative session. We live in our state is, again, like very progressive, I guess. But like it's a Democratic trifecta. So governor is Democrat, both state houses are Democrat. So you would think like tax reform and progressive values would be in alignment, but tax votes are really difficult, and especially for corporate Democrats and moderates. So I really appreciate what Sean was saying and kind of breaking it down into narrative, because we had kind of like three major things that come up with Washington's millionaires taxes. One, what if our millionaires move? And that's and there's data and whatever, but that's a big one. And then the slippery slope argument of like, well, it's an income tax on millionaires now, but one day it'll be an income tax on me. And then there's other things about like the bill that really come up, but those are the two main ones that we kind of bump up against. And the reality is that we're living in the worst case scenario is right now, because right now our cost of living is so high to live in the state that we all love. And the millionaires are not paying pennies. They're paying pennies in comparison. And so really and also large corporations on that note. So with the threat of what if they move, it's kind of like, well, that's all, that world already exists where they can live wherever they want and they just decide to live here in Washington. We also grow millionaires and billionaires. Like, it sounds bad, but we grow them very quickly because we have such a booming economy here in Washington State. We have some of the largest research institutions in our state. We have really good schools that people want to send their kids to. So this is like all the reason, and also beautiful nature and progressive values. So that's a big reason why folks want to live here. And so the fear mongering around millionaire flight was a really big narrative we had to push back against. The other thing is obviously the slippery slope, where it's like, well, what happens when this comes, like it's a millionaire tax now, but it could be an income tax on everybody eventually. And it just is really hard to connect with as many people and to connect and back down those narratives in a way that's trustworthy. So what's really great about what we worked really hard in the bill is there was a corporate carve out that was in the bill as it was passed from Senate to House. And then the House, we worked really hard with House champions to make sure that it was about like a $500 million carve out for the wealthiest corporations got removed. So that increased the amount that's going to communities. And then the other thing was, we expanded our working families tax credit, which is another like only progressive tool that we have in our toolbox to really lessen the tax burden on lowest income earners. So folks making under 40 to 50K a year here in our state receive a tax credit at the end of the year that they can file for. And that's money, that's direct cash back in their pockets. But really, it's just a sales tax rebate. It's pretty minimal in terms of actually making an impact on people's day-to-day lives, but it's a start, and we were able to expand it to more people and also increase the age thresholds to that. So seeing those kind of scales and seeing what was in the bill really put a lot of energy behind those things to really make sure that they were going to have the biggest impact on working folks here in our state. And it's kind of funny because we hear like all the time, oh, the bill's great now, but by the end of session, who knows what it'll look like. But this was one of those like lightning in the bottle moments where it actually ended up getting better and better because our lawmakers were truly listening to us and like wanting inputs on what the working families tax credit expansion should be. So it was really great to see that come together. And it was also very interesting to see like when they do want to do something, how quickly we can get it done and how collaborative we can all be. So I'm hoping to continue that into next year and to doing some more policy ones. But it was really awesome to see, especially for our short session. We only had 60 days to introduce and get it past the finish line. So it was like record time. So
that's real fast. I did not know that. If that definitely answers the question. 60 days is really fast. Tamika, what about you?
So, little history lesson. So I started off saying that tipped workers started after formerly enslaved people were off of plantations, but became servers. And so in the early 1800s, it was pushed back because tipping came from Europe, and it was like, hey, give this person a tip. But in Europe, it was additional. There was an hourly wage that I think we forgot about. Why did we forget about it? Because business interests lobbied really hard to say we should not have to pay these people. They should provide good service and get tips from people who they serve. It wasn't until 1966 that a sub minimum wage for tip workers was introduced, and that was $2.13. The federal minimum wage for tip workers to this day is still $2.13. Different states can increase it, which we have. But once again, as the minimum wage is moving up, tip workers are still being left behind. What makes this time different? Because as I also said in the beginning, we've been doing this since 2015. In 1970, a CEO of a franchise restaurant would make $20 to $30 more than the servers in 1970. Well, in 2026, it's 300 to 500 times that of their tipped workers. I believe we all saw, right, how much money gets wasted when Doge went into those offices. And I think people saw and got mad and said, we deserve our fair share, and we cannot wait. We cannot rely on government to do it for themselves, because they have taken the side of business interests who is giving them more money. I think it's really important for us to understand that I think we are in a really good time right now. And by that, I mean horrible. It's just like horrible. Like, what is going on here? But people are being faced with decisions every day that is showing them that they cannot not be political, right? It's like, oh, I don't have time to deal with politics. But when they are making policy that is actively hurting you, that's dismantling your community, we always say, and we relied on our allies in the legislation to try to push this bill as well, and it got killed as well. Right. And it was, well, let's do something for some of them, if not for all of them. I tell people all the time, I was raised by Black old school Mississippi parents. And my parents said, if you come home and you don't have your sister, you in trouble. So we don't go without each other. If we all have to stay at the lower level in order for us all to rise together, I think that's what One Fair Wage has been doing. But all the conversations that we're having, right? We have to focus on these fights locally and federally, because they are coming at us both ways. And if we cannot get them to do it on a federal level, once again, the minimum wage for the federal government for tip workers is $2.13 still. The individual states are helping to bring people out of poverty. And right now, we're still not able to give people what they actually are earning and what they're due. It shows that corporations have gotten a better fair share than we do. The fact that any business, I live in the backyard of an Amazon fulfillment center, and I own a small business, and my small business that made $150,000 paid more in taxes than Amazon did. And Netflix. I went to DC to lobby against this, and I was angry. And I talked to Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, and I was telling her, how dare I pay more than Amazon? And she said, you know what? Netflix got a refund. I'm like, what? Like, once again, these corporations, and people are tired. People are tired of these corporations getting more benefits than them. People are tired of their tax dollars going to subsidize, to give corporate welfare. We need to call it what it is, corporate welfare. They want to say that they can't give Medicaid or food stamps, or they can't even help kids get into elementary school or pre-K, but you can give Walmart corporate welfare, right? You can give DTE, Blue Cross, and Consumers Energy, which if a light wind blows in the state of Michigan, your power out for 3 days. You lose all your food. They give you $35, right? And call it a day. And our electeds on both sides of the aisle, right, get benefits from them. So we can't always even depend on our allies when they are benefiting from the policies and systems that we're trying to dismantle. I think it's important for people to understand that we are in a point in time where if we all can't go together, then none of us should go at all. And I think that movement would create a lot of storms where people would have to stop and address these things. If those people who are getting paid $15 an hour in Michigan saying we don't want it because the other people can't get it, then our electeds would have to figure that shit out. And we're not making them figure it out. And I think it's our job to either help them figure it out or do it for them, and then find somebody else to hold that job that can do it without them. Thank you.
Tamika, that was a beautiful narration, and thank you for breaking it down for all of us.
Tamika, that was everything. Well put. Thank you.
Honestly. And so before we close, there have been some questions that have been sent to us. A few people in our discussion forum raised a really important question about Citizens United and the Montana plan. And so I just want to pause here for that moment. Citizens United, for those who don't know, it's a Supreme Court case that helped open the door to unlimited and independent political spending by corporations, and then outside groups too. And a lot of people understandably hear that and then they think, well, how much can really change? And at the same time, we're seeing efforts like the Montana plan where organizers are trying to push back through state level strategy, even within the legal landscape. And so what I'd like to ask all three of you is, what is possible at the state level right now? And why do all of your fights still matter, even when Citizens United is still on the books? Sean?
Yeah, so our ballot initiative was intentionally constructed to withstand challenges to challenges coming from the Citizens United angle. And so I'm going to break it down into a couple pieces. Our contractor ban, where we ban government contractors from being able to make contributions, is based in part on Hawaii's contractor ban, in part on Delaware's contractor ban, and part in the federal contractor ban that stops military contractors from giving directly to members of Congress. So we took kind of the best elements of those pieces and put them together. The federal one has actually not been challenged in court. Both the Connecticut and Hawaii plans were challenged in court in the John Roberts court. So this wasn't a long time ago. But they were both challenged in court. Both made it all the way through federal appeals court, and the Supreme Court refused to take up further appeals. So they both withstood the legal challenges in the era of the Roberts court. The other piece that we have, banning regulated utilities from making contributions. Right now, nobody else that I'm aware of bans regulated utilities specifically. However, other states and Michigan in the past have banned highly regulated monopoly industries from making political contributions. So a couple examples, in New Jersey, they ban one highly regulated monopoly industry from being able to make any political contributions, and that's casinos. In Michigan, we had a ban on casinos making political contributions on the books through the end of the 1990s. Now, while it sounds like a good thing, the impact of that law in Michigan was basically just to ban tribal governments and citizens from making any contributions. So that was actually repealed by the legislature and never challenged in court. We believe that the reason why our ban on regulated utilities spending money in politics will stand up to Citizens United challenges is because of the fact that these are heavily regulated monopoly industries that make their money directly off of their relationship with the government, that they are then turning around and being able to buy. And so in order to prove that, we need a long-standing record of political corruption coming from these utilities. And any of us who live in Michigan probably know that there's a really long-standing record of political corruption coming directly from DTE and Consumers Energy. That record is, it's frankly very easy to build. You can just kind of look in the news on any given day. One example pull from during our Democratic trifecta, there was a real bad storm in February of 2023, and it knocked out power in most of the Detroit metro area, and in some communities, and specifically some communities in Detroit City itself, were without power for upwards of 2 weeks in freezing below freezing temperatures. A dangerous situation for people to be in. And of course, as that's going on, hotels are jacking up their rates left and right, trying to profiteer off of this. It was tough to watch. People across the state were outraged, and there was this broad this broad outrage that resulted in a bill package that had already been introduced finally getting some legs. It was a bill package for utility accountability, and it would have done actually some fairly minimal common sense things, like required utilities to pay more than I think right now they have to pay some very low amount, is about $30 a day or something, for people's lost food and medicine and stuff like that from a power outage. Requiring utilities to spend money on things that are actually going to make it so they have fewer power outages. There were several bills in this package. Again, they did some kind of minimal things. And so these bills were all of a sudden a thing that the legislature was considering. They had hearings on it in the State House Energy Policy Committee. Right about that same time, while his own constituents in Detroit were without power, the Speaker of the House at the time got a $100,000 donation from DTE Energy to his 501c4, his dark money account. And all of a sudden, those utility accountability bills were nowhere to be found. They didn't, they didn't move. They had the hearings, everything looked good, and then all of a sudden the bills went nowhere. So that's one example that we have of DTE directly buying influence in the legislature. And again, because it was the dark money side, the only way that we caught that was because a really good investigative reporter at the Detroit News looked up the 501c4's the 501c4's incoming contributions a year later when he was able to access them. We have that's one example. There are plenty of others. There's examples of DTE by basically funneling dark money to this far right wing anti-COVID ballot initiative that wound up also being kind of a front for a terrorist group that put armed men inside our Capitol building threatening legislators and shit like that. This group called Unlock Michigan. They were also tied to the people who tried to kidnap Governor Whitmer during the COVID pandemic. DTE funneled money directly to that ballot committee and made sure that it was dark money so that it couldn't be traced. The only way that's traced is because the Speaker of the House at the time, who is now on trial for all of the financial corruption related to his time in office, that's been released in discovery in that trial. So we were able to prove that Unlock Michigan tie. But there's a long-standing record of corruption with the utilities, and so that record of corruption, really makes the case as to why we need to do this, and as to why we believe this will be upheld if it's appealed. Every piece of this was designed to go right up to the line of what's allowable under Citizens United without going over that line. Yeah.
Thanks for that. It was really good to know that, these initiatives are prepped for that. Emma.
Yeah, so similarly, there's a few legal challenges with the millionaire's tax. Like I said, our state hasn't ever had an income tax before, and really there's a court case that we need to challenge in order to do this, or in order to implement it, called it essentially is meaning to disprove income as property. So in Washington State, we've long had we're allowed to have flat property taxes, but not a graduated property tax, which is also regressive and makes it so a lot of our property taxes are really harmful. And so in order to implement the millionaire's tax, our Supreme Court will have to make a decision about whether income is property. And this is an interesting dynamic because our tax code was written in the 1930s, and there's been very little changes since the 1930s, but our economy has obviously changed a lot. And it's been an issue that we'll need to tackle anyways. So I'm not a lawyer, and it's up to the lawyers and the Supreme Court to decide. But what I will say about the millionaire's tax is it's not the end all be all to fix our tax code. It is a very narrow in scope measure to implement a new tax, and also to challenge this court case that will ultimately help us create more progressive taxes in the future. So in that way, that's, it's a long time overdue thing to work on with our tax code, with the legal challenge. And it'll ultimately be decided by the Washington State Supreme Court whether or not to interpret income as property. And there's not a lot to say about that, but I think since it's written in a way that's very bare bones, it's going to be a really tight legal case. And I would offer that with any other folks that are exploring different tax reforms options in their state, it doesn't have to be the big revenue package that funds all the things that you need to. It just needs to be some sort of mechanism in place that then you can work on throughout the next few years, or, maybe make a 10-year plan on what you want your tax code to look like, or what type of funding you need to help support your communities in a meaningful way. So I just want to offer that as there are legal challenges, but that doesn't mean to steer away from it, because a lot of these things need more community voices and less corporate lobbying power behind them. I think that's a really big part of this. And like I said, it's not like the millionaire's tax is going to fix all of our problems, especially in terms of our tax code in Washington State, but it's a really good step forward. And then from there's other opportunities to, expand or figure out new forms of revenue that mirror a similar implementation. And I think another thing that's really great about the work we're doing, to hear about your guys' work and to see all this work happening in other states, is that something that we run into in Washington, but despite being one of the most progressive and business friendly places to have a corporation or be a wealthy individual, we still hear that, well, they're going to pack up and move to Florida. But when we work together and we mobilize together, there's not going to be a Cayman Islands of the Pacific Northwest that they can escape to. So I really encourage y'all, if you have any questions, especially as it comes to a legal challenge or an initiative challenge, I would say, I think it's a great organizing tool and narrative tool to really be talking about and educating folks, because Citizens United is one big hurdle that we have to tackle together. But when there's not, when states are standing up and funding the things that they want to and taxing the folks that they are helping to generate wealth for, that means that we can fund the things that we all care about here in our states. So I don't know, for us, it's with the HR 1 cuts, we saw, the Trump administration go after immigrants and reproductive rights and healthcare and climate and trans people. And our state really saw it as an opportunity to stand up for the things that we care about and that Washington State really cares about by funding the things that mean a lot to our communities and that will help protect our communities, and asking the wealthy to pay just a little bit more on their ultra wealthy annual income. So just want to plug that as like another opportunity. Just like, don't be afraid. Legal stuff is scary, but I think that there's also a real narrative opportunity with all these things.
Thanks, Emma. I think a really important piece of what you said was that this is a long game and that everything you do right now doesn't have to, conquer it all. It just has to begin. Tamika, you want to round us out?
Yes. I will say that the federal government, their policy on making sure that everyday Americans can work and take care of themselves has stagnated a long time ago. What the tipped system was based on was racial inclusion and a business model that said these small mom and pop restaurants need to put the responsibility of paying the workers on customers and not themselves. And that's not where we are today. We have multiple franchise restaurants that are making lots of money on the backs of women, minorities, immigrants, right, by not paying them. I believe that working people cannot afford to leave these rules unchallenged and wait for the courts or wait for the federal government. We individuals can do this work as states if we come together. And I so very much appreciate Emma, because we've seen that even in our own state, where a company will come to Michigan and then they will go to different municipalities and try to get the lowest tax rate, right? And so now municipalities are giving pilots and giving tax relief and trying to win a business, even though that business really isn't bringing anything to the community because they've gotten so many tax breaks, right? We need to be able to have those conversations. Citizens United changed the landscape, of course, because it gave corporations and wealthy interests more power. If you think of Rockefeller, Carnegie, right? These people were people who use things exactly how Citizens United had it. And we had to fight against them. We had to break up monopolies. We had to force them to pay living wages and create working conditions that allowed people to live and earn a living, right? So we know that we've had this issue before. Citizens United as a name might be fairly new in our history, but their tactics are not. And we need to understand that. We have the power to organize as people, to vote, and to win real change at the state level. And we've seen that happen time and time again. You have Washington State, you have California, you have Pennsylvania, you have states that have on their own raised minimum wages, passed paid family leave, and move policies in tough political environments. This is not a Democrat or Republican thing. This is a right or wrong thing, because we've had several Democratic presidents and the federal minimum wage has still not increased. We feel like state fights like MMOP matter so much because they are one of the most direct ways of working with people and educating them. People get mad about the rates of DTE, but when they find out that they're raising your rates and then they're using that money to pay off electeds to continue to raise your rates, people get pissed off. They want to know how to act and what they can do, what votes do they need to make, or what people they need to challenge. This is about building power, sustainable power, and making sure that people understand where we are. Because once again, we're repeating history. Nothing new that is happening now. Like, this stuff has happened for years and decades in this country. And we need to understand that we need to bring people together to shift the narrative and then put pressure on our elected officials. because sometimes it's like, do you want the position or the money? Sometimes they do pick the money, so they just gonna be corrupt no matter what, right, Sean? They just gonna be corrupt. But sometimes people want the position, and if they want it, they have to listen to the people who hired them. We are responsible for organizing these groups in the states, and then hopefully over a time bring this country back together with the values that we know will continue to work for us and the communities that we serve. Thank you.
Amazing. And so, as we end tonight, what do you all want people listening tonight to do next? It's so important for us to put, words to action. And so, can you guys share some concrete actions that you'd like the people listening to take? We'll begin with Sean.
Thank you. So we have a little over a month until our signature deadline, and we are on track to make our goal, but we need every single signature we can get. So number one thing we need people to do if you're in Michigan is sign the petition. You can go to mopupmichigan.org and find out where to sign a petition near you. If there's nowhere to sign a petition at near you, we will mail them to you. The second most important thing you can do after you sign that petition is circulate petitions. And whether you want to, we have paid positions circulating petitions full-time all around the state. We have volunteers out circulating petitions. We have people who are signing a petition and getting their friends and family to sign as well. Whatever you want to do with that, please, get other people to sign the petition as well. Anything we can do to make sure we get this over the finish line. The last thing, I know there's hopefully a lot of folks on here tonight who aren't in Michigan, at mopupmichigan.org as well. Guess what? You can also contribute. When we win, we're going to kick 7 out of the 10 biggest spenders in Michigan politics over the last decade out of power and make it so that they can't spend. So guess what? They're not writing us any checks. We need everybody who cares about this to be helping out however they can, and a financial contribution of any size would be amazing. And check us out at mopupmichigan.org to do all of that.
Amazing. Yes. Please go to mopupmichigan.org. Tamika, what can they do?
I wanted to play that song. I want money, lots of money. I think that's really important. One fair wage. Unfortunately, we were not able to get our signatures by our deadline, but that doesn't mean that we're stopping. We are starting back up in 2028. So over the next year and a half, we are building coalitions. So if you have an organization that wants to see this on the ballot in Michigan in 2028, please reach out so that you can join our coalition. The education is one of the biggest hurdles that we're having, because once again, if you're struggling, Dr. White, you are struggling. And I just gave you $15 an hour. And I said, but your sister is only making $5. And the only way I can increase that is to bring you down, right? They want their neighbors and their family members to be paid fairly, but they feel like they're barely making ends meet. So we have to stop putting people against each other, especially when they're struggling. So doing a lot more education and outreach in the community so people can understand what's going on, but also creating a coalition that is going to show up and let our elected officials know that, if you FAFO, right? We would like to work with you. We want to be in partnership with you. So if we can change these laws and policies through legislation without doing this, that's good. But if we have to organize around you, we will. Right? And then you're going to lose your job because now you made us mad. So I think it's really important, very petty. I think it's really important that we understand that people, because we don't have the money that they have, that people are the foundation of our win, and we need to get to them earlier. We need to educate them, and we need to bring them into community and have them walk this fight with us. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And Emma.
Hey, well, so I think one of the great things about working in coalition is that there's a revenue table for all of us. So we are a part of the State Revenue Alliance, and that is while I'm Balance Our Tax Code in Washington, there's also Fund Our Future Michigan, I think is what it's called, Fund Michigan's Future. So that's the state revenue table in Michigan. And there's a really awesome Fair Tax Summit happening in Detroit in June. So I'll be there June 15th to June 16th for this free conference. It's a really great opportunity to learn more about the tax justice movement and how we can all work together. So yeah, I hope that folks plug into that. And I would love to, if anybody has any questions or wants to meet up to learn more about what we're doing here in Washington, that would be a great opportunity to meet up in person.
Thank you all of our panelists for joining such a rich and timely conversation. I had so much fun talking to y'all tonight. I hope the audience did too. What I hope people are leaving with tonight is that they have a clear understanding that Michigan is not fighting alone, and these fights are really not impossible. They're very winnable. This session is really about whether or not we believe our government should be shaped by the people or by concentrated wealth. And Michigan has a chance to help move that story forward, but only if people show up, if they stay informed, and if they act. So please do those action items that all three of our wonderful panelists talked about. And thank you for being a part of this conversation and for being a part of the work ahead. I hope to see you out there.